On va pas... Alors, Amar CHEBALLAH, puisque tu as envie de bouger.
So, Amar CHEBALLAH, could you come up to the rostrum? You can dance if you like. Georges PETELET, Clément PERRIN, and Sébastien THIRIEZ. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Looks a bit like the Politburo here.
Non, ça vous plaît comme ça? Bon, c'est pas grave.
Moi, je me suis mis.
Bon, c'est parti. Merci d'être là.
Thank you for being present this afternoon. I'm going to rapidly introduce you. Amar CHEBALLAH, expert in automobile technology at MOBILIANS. Georges PETELET, business developer at CAPELEC, and you have a garage for MOTs. Clément PERRIN, president of GIEG and director of equipment at PERRIN. Sébastien THIRIEZ, sales manager for the ACTIA diagnostic equipment. Thank you for being here, and we're going to talk about a subject which is somewhat technical, legal, complicated. We have 4 experts with us who are going to help us understand a subject which is complex. And this, in fact, concerns the European data regulation, which concerns the protection of data. You know that data access in the automobile sector is a key issue today. There's just been a text adopted given the rules of the game for accessing data. So, Clément PERRIN, I'd like to ask you, what does this text stipulate in a very brief, summarized way? The text is quite general because the Data Act has as its ambition to set a framework for access of data linked to the Internet of Objects. We know that the vehicle is a connected object. It is modified in its extended electronic structure. And now that we have a framework for all of the actors linked to this sector of connected objects, which is the automobile, so it can be dealers, repairers, etc., or maybe a fashion designer wants to link up with the car manufacturer for a limited edition. So today, if we look at Equipoto and the automobile, this act also applies to repair and maintenance. Now, I think that the Data Act has 3 rules: access to data for diagnostic purposes, the availability of the data, which is regulated, and the price. Does that summarize the Act? Yes, we can say that if we stay within the framework of the automobile, you need to know that the Data Act is a general text. It is a legislation affecting all connected objects, not just the car. If we look at what concerns us today, what do you have in the vehicle? You have a driver who might have to access we might want to access his data for marketing purposes. We might want to access data about vehicle consumption, distances traveled, the day-to-day usage of the vehicle, and we need to repair and maintain the vehicle, and this leads us to have information on the vehicle propulsion, whether it's an electric vehicle, ICE, hydrogen, etc. Now, the connected vehicle, which will have an extended structure, you will have to do diagnosis via the vehicle and the server. So all of this calls for a text which is more operational to prepare the repair sector. Amar CHEBALLAH, the battle today is not new, the question of data access. Today, there are obligations on the car manufacturer to make data available to the repair market. Does this work in practical terms? I could summarize everything by saying, yes, it works well, but, and there's always a but in life, the but is in the background of this regulation, which gave us the possibility to access the technical data regarding vehicles. Well, this goes back to 2007 and the Euro 5 regulation, which imposed on the car manufacturer the giving access to technical data to all repairers, the independent repair shops, as well as the accredited workshops. So that was back in 2007. All of the vehicles that were Euro 5 from 2010 to now. In 2018, you have the 2018 858, which is the regulation today, which took up all of these different texts and added a number of obligations on the manufacturer and moved the cursor. In the past, the benchmark was the accredited repair shop. Today, the benchmark is the car manufacturer. That is to say, everything the car manufacturer does directly, well, he must give the possibility of doing this as well to the accredited repair shops and the independent workshops. You know, the over-the-air updating of calculators, things like that, which they do from their own premises. Well, the accredited repair shop needs to continue to do this activity, but so does the independent repair shop need to do. Is this possible? So everything is legally provided for. Yes, of course, and then there's a difference. We've noted that within MOBILIANS, for some years now, we've had a work group with the support of equipment manufacturers. You are a work group? Yes, my colleagues are in this work group. My colleague on this side, no, but that's because he's different. Now, with these people, we have verified to notice that, yes, it's possible to do this. We've had exchanges with the car manufacturers, very constructive discussions to bring them in line with the text. There's some very good actors. There are the French, which have which have worked with us. I will not name them. I never give names. And then under torture, I won't give you the names. So anyway, if you're part of the work group, you'll know. Anyway, the equipment manufacturers have worked on their side as well to have the tools. These vehicle communication interfaces, these are the boxes you connect to the vehicle, and this allows the user to communicate with the vehicle. This way you can do a diagnosis of the vehicle, update certain programs, etc. We came to realize that a number of car manufacturers, especially regarding electric vehicles, are not giving us access to all of this technical information. In that case, they shouldn't be homologated. So who is going to play policeman here? Not me, I'm not. Are there organizations maybe the professional organizations? I work as a consultant, as an advisor to the automobile sector. MOBILIANS is very, very vigilant to ensure that the car manufacturers open access to the repair shops, etc. Here I see Christine, who's responsible for this. In fact, We work to ensure that there be an opening and collaboration with these car manufacturers who are not in line with the regulation. And we work with internet sites. We try to get them to open up their work site, that their software be compatible, etc. This could take a bit of time, but we have to be vigilant. And MOBILIANS is always vigilant about this. And this because we have a work group that has been monitoring this for several years now. Now we're going to speak with you, Georges Petelet. Do the car manufacturers play the game, in your opinion? And same thing for Mr. PERRIN and Mr. THIRIEZ. Do you want to speak first? Go ahead. Well, I'm both very pessimistic and very optimistic here. As Amar was saying, CAPELEC looks at this from a different perspective. We look at this from the MOT point of view. There are rules. The Data Act is obviously going to contribute something. But if we were to assess what has happened over recent years, I do have some doubts. Why? Well, because since the very beginning of onboard diagnostics, the OBD was created to have access to the vehicle anti-pollution functions so as to be able to carry out a coherent diagnosis on emissions. By chance, the compulsory data were not always present. In the very calculators and their design, the data we were supposed to be able to use was not present. So you're speaking of the non-respect of the legal obligations? Well, each time we talk to the European Commission, each time we work, in fact, within the committee, which is part of the DG Move. This is, in fact, the DG responsible for MOTs. Now, every time we want to have these practices evolve, because vehicles are evolving, we're confronted with the fact that the data that should be present is not present. So, from that point on, it's clear we can't work according to a standard because the standard is not respected. Secondly, in 2017, at a time when I don't know which regulation was drawn up, but at one point a text was modified, and in fact the car manufacturer says, great, now I can eliminate the OBD plug, the socket. And so we went to the European institutions, bodies, the national bodies as well, to fight this. We came to realize that Carglass, with a German association, is in a court case against FCA, saying that what you do is not normal because you are, in fact, coding this data, and it's simple data. They're not sensitive. The data concerns engine management. So why is the data encoded? Why are you putting these obstacles in our way and preventing us from doing our work? So there are court actions that we are trying to organize at the European level so as to have the necessary echo. On the other hand, we have noticed that there's a consent dimension. This year, we have, in fact, the onboard fuel consumption monitoring. Act. This was the European Commission, the DG Climate, which was mad because they felt they'd been had with the emissions data, so they want to have the real data concerning the ICE consumption levels to see whether the demands placed on vehicles and real-life figures are the same. So this is operational. It works. Yes, it works. We have 10 data. We're not talking of giga data. We're talking of 10 data. Of this data, 50% of vehicle owners do not accept that we feed this information back. The connected vehicle we spoke of is dealing with 10 gigabytes of data per hour. We could get up to 39 terabytes per hour. Can you give us some data that's easier to accept? 39 terabytes of data is the equivalent of the exchange of the annual exchange of data of the 300 million Twitter subscribers for 1 hour on a vehicle. What is the consequence of this explosion in the data volume? Well, first of all, there's the need to determine what is private or personal and what is public data. When you say private, you're speaking, it is the driver, the owner, who can refuse to transmit the data? Yes, okay. You have the car manufacturer who is raising obstacles to the use of the data. Well, for example, how can the independents have access to this data flow? We're going to have to find, first of all, the right data, and then we need to have to see how we can access it. Mr. THIRIEZ, what is your vision of this data access? If we come back to the initial words concerning the have we won the free access battle to data? No, the answer is no, quite clearly no. The Data Act simply allows us to say that the battle will start now. There was no concern about whether or not the Data Act would be accepted because, in fact, it doesn't cover just the automobile sector. The Data Act covers all connected objects. So it is a kind of generic framework of principles. And behind that, what is difficult is the application, which is going to call for a specific regulation because our industry has systemic constraints, technical aspects, which will call for a technical and economic framework. And so we are obviously calling for this wholeheartedly through MOBILIANS and other federations, insurers, leasing companies, etc. So we are also participating in this as an equipment supplier. The Data Act is simply going to enable us to be a player in the game. Then my feeling is that we talk a great deal about regulation, etc., which is essential, but at one point we'll have to have a constructive discussion with the car manufacturers so as to convince them that access to data is important for them as well, because you've got a whole ecosystem of services linked to this. The improvement in engine performance, comfort, eco services, infotainment, etc. And it's clear that we cannot, they cannot address all of these items. They're going to have to work with partners. And obviously we have ideas, lots of ideas about what we can do with the automobile of tomorrow, with access to data to enhance the customer experience, reorient the automobile, case of a crash, for parts, for repairs, etc. So it's in the interest of the manufacturers as well. You know that if they try to lock up the system, well, you know, if you look at the world of smartphones, the only ones who are left are Apple and Android, because they opened up to different platforms, they integrated services, they integrated data. So they're the survivors. So if we try to determine what technology will be chosen by the car manufacturers for data sharing, is it going to be proprietary? Is it going to be open data sources? So there are lots of technical constraints that we're going to have to take into account to share data. Then there's also the question of the business model. Is it going to be an agreement between a service provider, the mobility provider, and each manufacturer? How is that going to work? Or is it going to be platforms like Android or Apple, which are going to be chosen? So there are different avenues of possibility here that are on the table, and it's going to be, the data is interesting as such, but what's interesting, what's important is what we will do collectively with the data. And I think that it's in the interest of the car manufacturers to think about this as well, for two reasons. First of all, because they have ambitious strategies with regards to multi-branding. You know, if I look at the multi-branding activities, if I don't want others to access my vehicles, but I want to access theirs, it's not going to work that way. Furthermore, if we look at the new customers for car manufacturers, you know, you have B2B, leasing companies, rental companies, fleets, etc. And their business is risk-oriented, and they don't want to remain captive, if you like. For all of these, it is essential they access data to determine the operating costs of a vehicle, the repair costs, servicing costs, all of the services that are offered with the vehicle. All that data is essential to these players. And so I think that this is one of the reasons that the manufacturers will have to facilitate access to data. So data access is obviously a major challenge for all of your organizations. So who is going to be leader here? You know, if we talk about standardization, I represent MOBILIANS at the CEN Standardization Organization, at ISO as well, where standards are produced. Now, to come back to what Sébastien was saying regarding data access, the way we access data, well, there's a standard which has just been accepted and will be published very soon, very shortly, which describes the exact process for accessing vehicle data between the service provider, that is to say the person who wants to access the data, and all of the pathway that has to be followed. We've defined it like something like a store, like an Apple store, where the car manufacturers would publish certain data which exists in the vehicles. Would it be a kind of a server to centralize? No. A decentralized server? No, not at all. We're talking of the connected vehicle. The connected vehicle is not just a vehicle which uploads data. No, the vehicle has to communicate. It has to give data. What the car manufacturer wanted was one single channel for the uploading of information, that the information go only to their server. But we have opened a certain degree of openness, of access, and this way the information can either go directly to their server or to the vehicle communication interface, the VCI. Certain players can access it. Now, once the information is available, once you know what is available in the vehicle, I wanted to develop a service, and a certain information is missing. So what do? We come to understand that in the standard, there be a contact on the car manufacturer's engineering side, not after-sales side, who, with the request, is going to jointly extract the data which might not be normally available, but so that it be available for the application that the person is requesting. So this regulation, which gives certain ways of operating, you also have standardization, which allows you to access certain functions, enable you to access data without going into some kind of legal battle. When the standard is referenced in the regulation, it becomes obligatory, and this means that the manufacturer is obliged to respect certain operating modes. All right. So this is something which is going to lead to certain operational possibilities, allowing the repairer to access the data. Yes, the Data Act in such is very good. It has given a lot of it. It represents a lot of progress. But it is going to concern your car, but also your fridge at home, because it's any connected object. Now, everybody knows you're not going to manage your refrigerator the way you do your car. A breakdown in the vehicle is not going to have the same impact as a shortage of butter in your fridge. Exactly. Yes, one moment. What happens with regards to the coding of keys? Coding of keys. Okay, I'll answer. The codies, the encryption of keys. So, a friend of mine said there was a problem with the encryption of keys. Did you lose your key? So what does the Data Act says about that? Nothing, absolutely nothing. But with 1858, 2018, yeah, the regulation 2018, 858, which applies, which is in force in September 2020, it states that I'm going to, in fact, give you the SERMI, the security, SERMI, which concerns the security of the vehicle in terms of its not being possible to break into. For example, the keys. Covering the keys, for example, you need to know that as of the 1st of August 2023, you need to know that all of the repairers who have been audited and accredited by a certified body, Veritas or whatever, once they have been audited, if they respect the criteria, they will be able to reprogram the keys by connecting to the site. So this means that the Act said you had access to all information up to 2020, except for the information linked to the anti-theft of the vehicle. And as of the 1st of August 2020, now you have all of the information.
We did not speak about the price or the cost of, we talked about just making the data available. But, well, you have to consider both. We are not just giving the data out for free. Well, you are selling our data, so you are the right person to talk about prices. Clément, you buy the data access. When the repairer wants to access data, the repairer has to pay for that access. Well, much depends on what you talk about. This is out of the Data Act. Let's forget about that and talk about more specifically, concretely. So, if we want to be clear, we want to access, information via the manufacturer's server, so that we can make the remote coding of parts, and for example, the voltage. For example, we need to know exactly what, and so we would in fact ask the vehicle system to monitor or to manage this new part I have just added. So to access the manufacturer's database, you would identify yourself and then pay for that. That's quite cumbersome and slow. Or you have what is now known as remote diagnosis. And how does it work? Well, you would use the OBD plug. You would then take it to the service center. Generally speaking, it's in fact a specialized company. And then you plug in the manufacturer's tool. So, if you, for example, change the plate, brake page, maybe you have to change the data regarding the oil change and so on. Now, with regard to the so-called RMI, which stands for repair and maintenance information, you would have to access the multi-brand technical data, which is available for your diagnosis tool, and this represents a major change compared to what prevailed in 15 years ago. At that time, it was not accessible, and now it is not only accessible but also affordable. Now, we, as an equipment manufacturer, we would like to make this accessibility more, so to speak, democratic. If you want, if your oil change costs 60 euros, and then the access to the data costs you 100 euros, then there is a problem. So, and how can we, for example, integrate all of that in a license system that would maybe cost 800,000 euros? And so all those are tricky issues that were overcome by the equipment manufacturers thanks to the different associations. As long as there was no, I would say, legal constraint. I tend to be optimistic. I think that the independent aftermarket operators, they will here again overcome these challenges, and successfully. We have been doing so for 50 years now. Sébastien. Well, just to supplement what was just said and to be more specific, currently the multi-brand technical data, that is for all brands, they are integrated or are included in your subscription if you are part of the network. So, for example, for multi-brand diagnostics process, so it's just a few hundred euros, so it's now accessible, now affordable. With regard to the unlocking of the systems in order for you to access the data, well, it is important to have negotiated all of that with the manufacturers on, upstream, so that you can access the system. So, and of course, you need the technical know-how. If you turn to Fiat and buy directly from Fiat, 275 euros per year and per workshop. It certainly increased, but now it is integrated in an unlimited fashion on the diagnosis tools. So we are trying, and that's our role, to make your life simple. When Clément said that advanced diagnosis systems were for the manufacturer's network, like activation of components, updating of ECUs, and so on, if you are technically good, and you can easily learn how to use those tools. But in practice, most garages, or repairers rather, tend to send vehicles to dealerships. And of course, you need to find a dealership next door. And also to have the time slot for that purpose, you need to also mobilize a technician for that purpose. In certain cases, it can be a week or 10 days training. So all of that, of course, is costly. They would have, and we as equipment manufacturers, we're trying to find solutions. We do have the manufacturer's tools and our hotline for our hotline and then technical platform. So these are services that, of course, you have to pay for, because we have to pay for accessing the data. So, but in any case, it's just a few hundred euros. Don't worry that much. We are here to provide solutions. Mark, can you confirm that the costs are contained, are at least monitored? Well, we have a sort of watch-out system for on those prices. Having said this, it varies quite a lot depending on the manufacturer you talk about. 1 hour connection, that is during which you will access all the technical information regarding a given brand, let's say Toyota, and that's going to cost you 5 euros per hour. But then if you were to select Tesla, Pascal, it's quite expensive. Well, 1 hour using technical data to repair a car. Toyota is affordable and others not. So I wouldn't say that these costs, or rather prices, are under control, or but in any case, we are discussing and come up with something that would be proportional to the operation I'm doing. I'm willing to pay 39 euros or 40 euros if I'm replacing a gearbox, so taking into account the actual price of the gearbox. But if we're talking about changing pads, the margin of changing, generated by changing the brake pads, that margin is shifted onto the manufacturer. So therefore we need to work with the manufacturers and try and find out a system whereby we would have to pay per operation, based on the type of operation. Well, I think that with regard to the MOT, that should be free of charge. Why? Now, when you have a center, what we would actually expect from the center is a sort of a judgment, and with a penalty, and this, whatever the tool used in order to access the vehicle information. Now, today we are talking about EPDI. What does that mean? Again, acronyms. Periodical technical inspection. It's like MOT, except that it sounds better with E, because it sounds electronic. Now, in any case, it's a sort of standardization process in which we have been involved over the past 7 or 8 years. We currently have the items that make up the standard, and DG Move is now telling DG Grow that they're going to impose this system on the vehicles, and the emergency stoppage system can be tested in the same way, whatever the tool I have at hand and whoever, as an operator, is using the tool. So now the issue is to make sure that this standard is applied by manufacturers and that it can be operated in the technical centers. So we need to say that, well, I have a standard, I implement this standard, and everything is open, and this means free of charge. So, in fact, this is something you are working on. Well, what I mean is that we have developed a standard, and a standard is meaningless if it is not, in fact, supported by a regulation. So the standard does exist. Now you need to come up with a regulation. So the regulation would say, well, this is what I have, that's the standard, and then I would make that standard compulsory, and this is provided for by the rules, and which would mean that the 50 or 60 ADAS functions which are electric safety functions will be properly checked in the technical control centers. So that's for the MOT, but it's different from the actual repair. No, not really different, because in fact, if I fail in the technical checks, then my car will have to be sent to the garages for repair purposes. Amar? Well, let's say that we have different regulations. ISO 18 140 -126. So in fact, they list different usage cases which the manufacturer has to comply with to be compliant, so to speak, in terms of the openness of access to the RMI, for example, or create an account, and including accounts, account for the company and account for the different employees, and the possibility for them to access and telecode and so on and so forth. All of that is listed. So this range of standards need to evolve when the type approval regulation is published. The working group in charge of revamping those standards and to include the new requirements provided for in the regulation, so this working group is working on that. So, let's say, broadly speaking, there is an agreement. The working group had been put on the back burner because, in fact, there was difficulty organizing discussions about with the different players. So, but now, unanimously, we agree on the description of the ADAS features, and for a given vehicle, what are the ADASs available in a given vehicle, and which of them are active, which are no longer operational. So, and this is one of the usage cases. So, in the new version of 540, so it's being considered. It's now a matter of policy, I would say. So, accessing the technical data on electric vehicles, and don't forget this very important thing. As George said before, OBDs that were for the emissions. That was the purpose when it was created. But now, via this plug, you can also have the other type of data, not just emissions. So, in fact, in this plug, not almost everything can be conveyed through that plug. So you can have even Ethernet, and the capacity and the speed has been also enhanced. so it can be used for updating plenty of items on the vehicles. Now, this OBD plug has to be maintained. I mean, it has to be kept in vehicles. So it is written that a vehicle to be homologated, it has to, and so on and so forth. That's the reason why you have the OBD plugs on the electric vehicles. Some manufacturers, well, initially said, well, there are no emissions, therefore no OBD plug. Well, unfortunately, we are short of time. We have to interrupt now, but in any case, thank you. We have been talking about a quite complicated subject. Well, you did hear about a number of concepts, and next time we shall dig deeper into those concepts. In any case, thank you. So, but if you were to draw a conclusion, bearing in mind that we are currently waiting for a new text that would integrate what we have been talking about so far, maybe not everything, but a significant part of what we have been talking about. And it's going to be specific to the automotive sector. So all usage cases are available, standards are available, and the next thing to do is to show goodwill. Well, maybe we're going to give the last word to the GIEG president. Well, what we have to retain is that for vehicles on the road, we already have the solutions. Turn to the partners, I mean, suppliers, distributors. This can help, in fact, remove the existing obstacles. And we are waiting for a text for the new generations of vehicles. It's up to the Federation and the different players to put that into practice. For the time being, we will be able to change data, to change, in fact, values, and the garages will remain profit centers, and whether you are talking about a 2 chevaux or a connected vehicle, it will remain a profit center. Thank you for listening. I would like to thank the audience. I would like to thank Florence. Within 10 minutes, we have a conference on the reusable parts, how to boost this market. Have a nice afternoon.